Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Born Podcast, brought to you from our studio here in central Pennsylvania. I'm your host, Nathan Bowden, and on this podcast, we get to champion the message of entrepreneurship and business ownership by interviewing business owners and leaders right in our region, learning all about how they started, grew, and are running their successful organizations. You can find a full replay of our broadcast on our website at questmont.com/bornpodcast. Also, find us anywhere you love to listen to podcasts, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, wherever. Search for The Born Podcast and click that follow button. And you can see us on every social media channel that's out there, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, you name it. Find us, hit that follow button so you can stay up to date on all these episodes. And I'm really excited today to be able to bring on my man, Dan Mowery, who, well, he's in the flesh. Dan's got a lot of stuff going on. He's a busy guy, got a lot of different ventures, and this is going to be a really awesome time learning about what you're doing and what you got going on, particularly with your newest venture, Bowl Now. So, Dan, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, man.
So why don't you give our viewers just maybe a little background of you, who you are. I think you grew up in this area, you got roots to this area, but just give us a little bit of background of you and who you are.
Sure. So my family's been in the area for 5 generations now. We started out with orchards. My grandfather then pivoted to entertainment businesses. So I grew up around entertainment assets, everything from bowling centers, golf courses, movie theaters, skating rinks when that was a thing.
Yeah.
So, that was, where I grew up, and then I'd say my first idea to open my own business came at 19. Growing up around them, they were my daycare. I was there all the time. Didn't really want to have anything to do with them. It's like if you eat something too much, you just don't want any more of it. So I wanted to run away. So moved out to Colorado. Had my first idea as 19 years old as an out-of-state student. And, I realized that I had nothing I needed in college. I didn't have any dorm room supplies, bedding, everything you need to start your year out. And I was like, wait a minute, out-of-state kids, freshmen aren't allowed to be on campus. They're not allowed to have cars on campus.
Right.
So then at that time, this is pre-Uber, I had to take a taxi to the closest thing was a Walmart and then buy all this stuff and take it back. I was like, this is a pain. Why don't we combine this into something where it's one website and everyone can order everything they need. And at that point, they get this flyer when they're in 12th grade and it's like, hey, we'll order this. And I called it Easy Freshman because I thought that would be a good play on names and roll this out. But I was 19 and that failed pretty rapidly for a variety of reasons, from branding to lack of ability to the whole 9 yards. But
I can imagine
the point is,
there was some mixed messaging that might have gone on there.
But the point is, so I caught the entrepreneurial bug at 19 and I haven't looked back. There's been awesome. A lot of failure, a lot of success, but 32 now. And that's how it all started.
We'll dig into that a little bit later because, so my nephews are starting to get into sports now and are having trouble losing, and I'm trying to use it as an opportunity to teach them that some of the best lessons that we can learn in life come from losses and failures. I want to maybe dig into that a little bit later, but talk about what you got going on now. So I know you mentioned some family businesses. I happen to know some of this information, but
sure.
What were the first ventures? So once you got the entrepreneurial bug, what did you get into that you're maybe still running now?
Sure. So from that, there were several years of failure, and we definitely should touch on that more. I think that's a very important part of entrepreneurship. It's not if you're going to fail, it's when you're going to fail and how you recover or persevere through those experiences. Yeah. But, my first success, I was 22, I took over a bar, and we 3X'd the revenue in the first year with the team I built. We started as a fresh team, and it started making money. And from that, my family had a bowling alley for sale internally. They're like, hey, we were just talking within the family, and I was looking for more opportunity. And they were kind enough to say, hey, we will sell you this. So really appreciate that opportunity. But, that was my second thing that really worked. So we put in other product lines, rebranded, added on food and beverage, added on a patio. And over time, the revenue over the past 7 years has gone up 5x. So awesome. Significant growth. We then took that to a second location. We have several new construction projects in the pipeline right now that we'll be executing on. But the point is, we refined the first location, had a second as more of a petri dish. Okay, let's refine this model. The model's refined now. Now it's time to scale to additional locations.
Yep.
Brand that and become a multi-site chain. So that's one initiative. My family also has a golf course that I bought into.
Okay.
And we're continuing to improve that. And over the years to come, you'll see a wedding venue coming and other remodeling and development
at the course
occurring.
Is it, from what I understand with golf courses, money isn't made on golf. It's made on food and beverage and everything else. So you're really, so you're really buying the asset for the land and then hopefully getting a captive audience through golfers to be able to participate in the higher margin portions of the business, which means you have to have those to allow the golf course to succeed. Is that fair?
Totally accurate. So there's two ways you make money on food and beverage. Option one, you have such an amazing, ever-changing product that you have a cult following that continuously comes to your location. Mm-hmm. Option two is your location. You have a captive audience, whether this is at the beach or an entertainment venue.
Yep.
We have entertainment venues. That's the model I know.
Yes.
Hey, you're here. You need food. We're going to give you something that is better than you expect. Yet the core focus is you've come here to have fun, and you happen to be eating. So that's how that works out.
Yeah. Awesome. What did that look like when you bought into both? Because I guess you didn't really buy into the bowling alley. You bought that as in its entirety, correct?
Correct.
But you bought into the golf course. But from you personally, like how did that work with family? Like were you negotiating at the table for price, and how did you deal with financing? Was it like
all of that, man? That all comes into play. I'm very grateful how supportive my family's been of the succession planning. The biggest thing I'd say, the hardest thing for that is in family businesses, there's this great lesson of red hat, blue hat. Have you heard of this before? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you've got your red hat on, you're in business mode, and it is just your thinking has nothing to do with the individual. Blue hat, you're in family mode.
Yep.
And you really need to set those lines. It's very, very important that you're all going to go to Christmas, have a great time. You're all going to go into work the next day and focus on making money.
Yep.
So it's very important. If you set those lines properly and you have those boundaries, you can have a very successful relationship, succession plan, and relationship with family members.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a lesson a lot of family businesses need to probably learn. Probably why a lot are doomed to fail, because they can't create that separation.
Shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, as the saying goes. Because it's like, hey, the first one makes it, the second one grows it, third one blows it. Seems to be what a lot of people say occur.
Yeah, I mean, statistically, I think 2 to 3% of family businesses actually get to and through the 3rd generation. And I think that's probably even maybe a more gracious statistic, because I don't know that they're getting the full populace of data. But all right, how did now you're doing Bowl Now? That's your newest venture.
Sure.
Talk about how that really came to be, and what drove you to want to pursue another venture, because on the surface you could look and say, we got construction projects on the bowling alley, we got the golf course we're trying to build up, we got projects with that. So I think one thing I'd like to do is do a whole new startup venture and really dive into that. So talk through that a little bit.
Absolutely. First, I'd like to preface that it's so important that you properly build systems and procedures and delegate effectively with controls in place to assume, not to assume what's going on, but to know what's going on.
Yeah.
So before I dove into Bowl Now, I decided, okay, we're going to really plan out everything from SOPs to an LMS or learning management software to auditing. And this is the way we're going to run our businesses. We need to integrate all these things in and then hire someone in place to operate that. So we hired somebody who's a VP of ops who oversees all brick and mortar. So that was successfully delegated before I chose to dive full in on Bowl Now. And there's obviously this, this period where you're riding two horses of, is this going to work? And if you don't know, don't do all this in the hopes to someday get the data and say, hey, we've pressure tested this, has the potential to work, delegate and dive in. So after that step was taken, and we decided that, hey, this makes sense. I dove all in on this, which is Bowl Now. And where that came from, the root of it was I saw every other entertainment vertical and really every other vertical be disrupted by technology, with the exception of bowling. Golf, theaters, ride share, across, it's not new news.
Right.
I'm not,
hotels,
literally everything.
Everything.
Not bowling. It's the number one participated in activity for a recreational sport. 120 million people do it a year. You're talking 5x the size of the golf market, which got disrupted in the early 2000s. Theaters, early 2000s. All these other verticals, early 2000s. Bowling's been untouched. And so I saw this opportunity. I'm like, why? Why is this not working? Why has no one done this? And I kept asking people who are in the industry, like, when's this product going to be available? You have all the resources. Are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? It's coming out soon. Hasn't come out. So I was like, okay, so we're going to test this. We're going to build out an MVP or minimal viable product on Midway and see if it works. So I spent my own money at first, built this out, tested on Midway, and it was working. So I was like, hey, we might be onto something here. We've got an app. We've got easier points of access to the center. And people can get on their application, find, reserve, and pay for bowling experience. And it's working at one location. Okay, let's go to 4. So we go to 4, and then, okay, we have some great ideas from all these places. Hey, I'd like this. Hey, I need to have a buffer of when people come in. Hey, I need to clean up the lanes. All these little feedback, points from our core audience of business customers. And then we scaled to 12 locations, and we're like, okay, we've done what we've asked. Let's go out more. So we've gone to 12, and got a lot more feedback. And then we really knew we were on to something. So at that point, it was time to say, hey, let's go raise more money than has already been allocated towards this, and let's really shoot for national and then global disruption within the vertical of bowling. It sounds like a very small place, but at the same time, you have 120 million annual participants. You're in a multi-billion-dollar market. If you're a winner-take-all disruptor in that market, you're going to make a fortune doing that. Not to mention, at my core, I believe more not about the money, but it's about the change and building something of value. And if you do that, the money just naturally starts to show up. You know what I mean? So I know there's a need for this, and I know it can be achieved. So now it's to the point of execution, So how are we going to assemble the finances? How are you going to assemble the team? How are you going to penetrate the market? How are you going to make sure you have proper customer care, and really building a plan around all that and then execute. So,
and this is going to be a very different path, trajectory. Requires a different skill set, different team, different mechanism for growth than the other ventures that you've been a part of, correct? I mean, it's going to be completely different because you got brick and mortar and you're talking about how do we generate sales, which is really maybe how do we do some marketing and advertising and branding to be able to bring people in. But now you're talking about a pivot to a tech company and launching and building up a massive tech company. So what are you learning that's really different about that process than what's been a part of Midway and the golf club?
Sure. First, I'd say it's essential that you get an expert in whatever field you're going to pursue. So the brick and mortar, our vice president was running a chain of hotels. He has extensive experience in brick and mortar. And the way we looked at that is, like he said, if I can run hotels that are open 24 hours a day, I sure can run your businesses that are open half of that time.
Exactly. Yeah. And I can do it in half the time.
Exactly. So it's like, find a specialist and let them dive in. And then on the other side, for the tech company, I searched for a very long time for the right co-founder. And that was essential for me because, during the MVP phase, you can kind of cowboy it and get through. But if you're going to really build something that has national or global disruption, you need somebody who's been down that path before.
Yeah.
And don't be greedy and say, hey, I'm not going to give up any of my company because, I'm going to get this all myself. But it's better to have small slice of something massive than an entire pie of nothing. So I found a co-founder. In his last venture, he broke the Series B, 100 million valuation, all that. So he has experience of taking something from an MVP to a level of enterprise grade software within full industry disruption. So finding the proper person to partner with on whatever business you're getting into, unless you are the domain expert and you have a business background, is absolutely essential. So because of the two of those paths that I'm pursuing, the way I look at it then is it's my job as the CEO, founder, and leader to see around the corner, determine which way to move the team, and the actual expertise in those areas are delegated to people who, one, you trust, two, you can count on long term, and three, really know what they're doing. So once that has been, the deal has been set up properly, then you can go. So I would have never pursued the software this in depth without that co-founder. So that was essential.
How did you guys meet, you and the co-founder?
There's a site called Angels List for investors, but there's also a co-founder match page there. But man, I pursued everything. I was on, LinkedIn, Angels List, going to mixers, Upwork, everywhere, so it really just interview after interview after interview. Are you the right person? Are you the right person? Are you the right person? And funny enough, when I first met him, it was during like the tech boom, before the recent pop of the bubble, where a lot of people who had like fluffy businesses are just gone now, so it's like if you don't have an enduring needed product, you're out at this point. And we met, and I just had started, and I had all these grandiose ideas and stuff, and we talked, and it didn't make sense at the time for numerous reasons. One, his expertise, and two, my lack of any tech startup. And then I reached back out actually like 6 to 8 months later and said, hey, how's your latest project going? Or what are you looking at? He's like, you caught me at a good time. What have you done? And I said, hey, everything I said I was going to do. I opened an app. It's working. It's making money. Now I want to scale it. And he's like, oh shit, like, let's really talk about this, because it makes sense once that person sees that you're going to do what you say you're going to do, because tons of co-founders hopped on the call. We'd talk once or twice, and then I'd call them again, and they'd be like, well, and it's like, like there's not enough time in one's life to squander on changing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this ties in to, we were talking earlier about failures, because some people would look at your first interaction with the co-founder as a failure because he said no. Absolutely. Even though it didn't end up being a no, but he said no, which I'm an eternal optimist. I gather that you are as well. When I hear no, a lot of times I hear not right now in my mind.
Yeah.
And it's more of a challenge for me to say, okay, well, how do I turn that to a yes? If it's something that's worth pursuing. Obviously, some people that say no, maybe it's a blessing because you realize it wasn't good anyways. But how do you, can you teach that mindset to yourself? Like, how do you, if you're not ingrained in that, I feel like I had that from the beginning. You probably had that as part of just who you are. But what can you do to retrain yourself to take those experiences and not let it get you down, but help it to motivate you to keep pushing forward and keep pursuing that dream and that ultimate mission?
I think that failure is something that's not if it's going to happen, it's when in business. So it's absolutely going to occur, and in life. I mean, just in general, failure is going to occur, and it's not if it's going to occur. It's what is your reaction to failure. You know, is your ego getting in the way? Is, you know, an insecurity getting in the way? You know, what's the root of what's disrupting you? Because I have obviously you get knocked down, but you got to brush off the dirt and get back up. But what's in your way of getting back up? And I think that's more a personal journey. It's more of a personal thing than, you know, a playbook with numbers. You know what I mean? It's definitely more a bit into the individual psyche, I think. For me, I had to, you know, I had my own things I'd overcome in life. And then you got to just think, how do I adapt how I overcame, you know, losing a game in high school? How did I bounce back from that? You know, and just moving that on to the next thing, because another great entrepreneur, my first mentor, he told me, I was like, you know, what's a lot of money that would bother you to lose? He's like, it's an irrelevant thing for me to say, because every decade you're just going to keep adding on zeros. And it's the same way with failure. You're going to fail every time you fail. Be bigger. Like if I looked at my latest failure, and I'll explain that in about 30 seconds. If that happened out of the gate for me, it would have been catastrophic. And now I'm like, it was really annoying, but we got over it. And that was when I bought my second center, went to closing, and assumed everything was fine with the water and sewer. And I'll never make that assumption again, because it wasn't okay. And it cost me a year of being open, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then you're stuck with, you know, a failed project. You know, you own this asset that is not able to be open to the general public due to environmental issues. And you really look in the mirror and you're like, how did I make this stupid of a decision? You know? And it's just something that I didn't know at the time. And then you have to decide. You're laying on the ground, and it's like, persevere or give in. You know, what do you do here? You know, do you fold? Do you declare bankruptcy? Do you walk away? Do you just cut money in and hope? Do you bring on another partner? What do you do? And I think that's really, it's the way you fall, not it's not as much I'm just gonna lose now. It's how you fall. And the way we got back up is ran a tight budget, worked through it, did the remediation, and we just stuck it out because I believed in the beginning. I still do, and it's profitable now. So it just took over a year of very light sleep.
I'm recalling a experience I went through earlier in my career with a venture with a group that was a part of a firm that I was previously affiliated with, and cost me similar dollar figures. Ultimately boiled down to us, and I had a partner at the time that was involved in it as well, not understanding the documents that we signed. And I, at that point, was in the same, if that had happened probably 5 years earlier, would have been absolutely devastating. And it was, to me, I was not happy about it, but I was more annoyed. But ultimately I looked at it and said, look, I'm never going to make that mistake again. I'm going to know every document I sign. I'm going to understand what my out is. And the lesson I learned was pursuing all these things with the exit in mind, because you need to know what your exit strategy is before getting into something, because you need that fail safe just in case. And we got to protect ourselves, right? Always have that ripcord.
Yeah.
And while those lessons are expensive, the value that you get from them is far greater than I think the cost that you end up incurring through that. So
totally agree.
I would say probably you wouldn't want to go through it again for the financial part of it for sure, but definitely a great lesson learned.
Yeah, well, that's just part of it. You know, it's just, that's just part of being in the arena, as another mentor always said. He's like, hey, you're going to get knocked down. It's just part of the game, you know? But, I think it's essential to learn proper coping mechanisms with failure. I think it's essential to truly understand that it's going to happen, and really learning from it, and also reflecting on it in a way with some compassion towards yourself, because everybody fails, I'd say the worst way I've seen people deal with it is blaming, anyone but themselves, so then your ego gets wrapped into it. You're like, well, this is your fault. You didn't tell me, or you're a bad client, or blah, blah, blah. It's like, here's the thing. You guys engaged in something and it's not working now.
Yeah.
Everyone's responsible, because it's not a one-way street. It's like everybody was responsible for that failure. So why did it happen? How do we remediate it? And how do we not let it happen again?
Yeah. I don't know if you're like me. I get into those situations, and the first thing I do, well, maybe not the very first thing. First thing I might do is say, I can't believe they did that. But ultimately, I always will turn back to, all right, what did I do, or what could I have done differently? Because it's ultimately, when we own it, when we're running it, and it's our responsibility, it's our responsibility. And I think if you don't take that seriously, and personally from the standpoint of personal responsibility, you're never going to move forward, because like that, you're always blaming somebody else, and it's never your fault. And if that's true, then you're never going to learn.
True.
Because you obviously believe nothing's wrong with what you're doing, right?
Yeah. And I mean, you can continue that way, but it's a very difficult path.
Yeah, it's not going to be fun. It's definitely not going to be fun. So talk a little bit about the some of your, what other failures have you learned from that have really been, I think, impactful in just how you changed what you did with your ventures?
Sure. So let's see. What is a good lesson from failure? So when I was living in Colorado, I got into glass blowing, and I started importing from China, and that worked out well. But I learned a very valuable lesson: cash flow. Mm-hmm. Cash flow is essential, because we were all happy, raised the money, had our prototype, made the order, and we're like, all right. And then it's like, okay, so what are we going to do for 3 months? Meanwhile, this is made, delivered, all that. So I would say I learned very early that cash flow is essential. Let's see, what other big lessons from failure have I learned? Honestly, on the software, the biggest thing I've learned there is the difference. Brick and mortar is a well orchestrated long-term plan, and you continuously steer a large ship in a direction.
Yep.
I feel like software is perpetual failure.
Yeah.
And reflection and fixing.
Yeah.
Hey, we have a theory. Let's test it. We were wrong. Where were we wrong? And then just replicate that over and over and over again. Hey, people are asking for a chatbot. Yeah, let's open one. Boom. Where were we wrong? Because I promise you, anything your theory is compared to what is needed in the market is wrong.
Absolutely.
So I would say most recently would be the software, because it's just, honestly, it's perpetual change to what you're doing, because you always need to involve something new. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, so AI is absolutely huge right now.
Yeah, just going to bring that up. Yeah.
Think about, the chatbot. Are we missing an opportunity incorporating that into it? Probably are.
Yeah.
So we miss that. So is that a failure, or do you just look at it as an opportunity now to jump on? Right.
It's better to be in some of these cases. It's better to be late to the game than to just completely miss it, of course. But I was going to ask about that with AI and I don't all the ChatGPT and Jasper and all these ones that are popping up. What do you see opportunities for that in implementing with any of the businesses? I mean, I know it's obviously very tech heavy, but in my Vistage group, we've been talking about how we may be able to incorporate it not from a tech scale perspective, but just automation of certain things that if a human doesn't need to do it, and we can free a human up to do things that are more human and actually drive more value, how could we use it that way? Do you see applications that you'll be able to use that for?
Absolutely. So any repetitive task, no matter what it is, in my opinion, is going to be disrupted by artificial intelligence. You look at the Industrial Revolution and what occurred there, and how that really changed things. And people are like, oh, all the jobs are going to go away. They didn't all go away. It's just more, we work on the machines. We work with the machines.
Right.
We observe the machines. And the thing that I think is going to happen is the same with artificial intelligence. It might draft 90% of the content that you're going to post this month or release in your e-blast or whatever that might be, but it's always going to need refined. There's always going to be error. It's always going to need, well, not always, it'll become less and less and less. Right. But the point is, there'll be a huge timeline that human beings are needed to do that portion of it. Things that take a high level of cognitive function along with the human element, I think will take a very long time to replace, if that ever can be replaced. And that will be reserved for human beings. But anything that's redundant or can be automated within SOPs, I mean, that's going to be done by technology. Max, I give it 3 years. Max. I think this is the birth of it. In 3 years, that'll be rolling along.
I would agree. There's a lot of change coming in that space. It's exciting because from an efficiency standpoint, it's fun to think about how to do that well and continue to streamline things. So maybe two general questions to kind of wrap up this portion of the show. One, specifically with Bowl Now, what would you define success in Bowl Now? And I know like you got a target out there. You said about disrupting things on a global scale, but what would you define truly success? And do you have an exit point? Like when is Dan ready to say,
enough is
this is enough? Yeah.
So I think true success would be a true industry disruptor. I'd equate that to 15% of the market share. Okay. So you're over $1 billion valuation at this point. To me, that's true success. When I would exit is, how about this? It's not when I would exit, it's when I'll get out of the way if I see a better opportunity for that to occur. For instance, somebody with the existing distribution channel says, we can get this around the world tomorrow like that. Yeah. It might make sense for, either a partial exit. I don't think complete exit until it's a little further along.
Well, I was going to say, at that point, I mean, if there's a channel there, you sell the intellectual property and keep a small portion and do some sort of roll up because you'd want to participate in that as well. But,
and help. Yeah. Because I feel, this is my baby. I'd really like to see this
which
really
is
rip up.
There's a very common recap a textbook recap structure where somebody else is coming in with efficiencies that you might not have that can scale it and take it like this to this.
Absolutely.
And oftentimes your second exit is more lucrative than your first because of that scale, which is ultimately the goal.
I would totally agree. So I would say it has to be, I really want to hit the 100 million plus with it. That's kind of where my head is. Yeah. It's like, that's the number where somebody walks in with a check. It's like, all right, so be it. Yeah. But to me, that would be true success with that is that valuation above. But I'd like to see it on a trajectory towards that true industry disruption. So whatever the succession plan would be, it wouldn't be like, we're just going to, shut this down so you're not a competitor. Not into that idea. Yeah. It's got to be on that trajectory because I saw what it can be. I've seen it done in other verticals. This is teed up perfectly to do it. So I want to see it executed. So that's very important to me that happens. Yeah. Awesome. All right. And then on a personal level, what would success look like for Dan Mowery as an individual, as an entrepreneur at large, extrapolating Bowl Now as a specific venture, but what would define success for you in 5 years? You could say, my life has been successful. Funny enough, not more business. Yeah. I really, I believe that. Oh man. You have the pendulum, and you're going back and forth and you think to yourself, when I was younger, I was all play and no work, and now I'm all work and no play. Yeah. And somewhere in the middle, where you have time to build relationships you care about, you have time to travel, you have time to just enjoy your life. as well as working on what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And I've definitely pushed it to the point now where I'm like, okay, I'm all in.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have work, and that's what I have, you know? So bringing that back some and getting back to living a little bit, I would say would be success. And I always think of the movie Office Space when he's like, what do you do with $1 million? He's like, nothing. He's like, shit, you don't need $1 million to do that. So,
yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, I have these things teed up. I want to see them through. I want to see them really successful, and then delegate a chunk. But it's just, today's not that day to do that.
Yeah.
So I would say have a little more balance, and also get a little bit more into mentoring. And I'm not saying, I mean, I'm only going to be in 5 years, my late 30s, but I know how beneficial that would have been when I first was trying things,
sure. Yeah.
you know, and I know how beneficial mentors have been to me. They've been one of the biggest game changers in my career, you know, so I think doing that as well for younger entrepreneurs could be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great and a way of giving back and sharing what you've learned to help propel the next generation of Dans and entrepreneurs to be able to do that. And I would imagine that as a fairly newly married individual, that your now wife would love to hear your 5-year plan. That sounds like it's going to be great. So we'll make sure to bottle that up. We'll send a nice little video just of that piece to her, so she can take that and say, that's nice. I love it. Well, Dan, this has been a lot of fun. And I know our viewers are going to really appreciate hearing all about this. We're going to have information on Bowl Now, on Midway, and on the golf course in our show notes, and we'll be pushing that out. But everybody at home that's been watching this, the Bowl Now may not be, if you're a bowler, or if you're thinking about bowling, keep your eye out for that. You can use it at Midway right now if you want to use that to be able to bowl. But also, if you're local here to Central PA, check out Midway, check out the golf course. They're doing great things at both of those places. Midway's got everything from bowling to arcade to golf to axe throwing to a full bar. I mean, just a great, cool spot. You won't be disappointed if you're there. And then, of course, if you want some good golf and good food, go to the golf course as well. So be sure to check all that out. Dan, it's been awesome, brother.
Thanks,
Appreciate
man.
you being on. Everybody at home, thanks for joining us on another episode. We'll see you in a couple weeks with more of the Born Podcast. Thanks.